I'm here with Neil Rowsell, another one of our long-term players in the IDSRA. Neil, I want to ask you a few questions for the benefit of the people here tonight. First of all, I want to ask you, when was it that you began your time as a player?
I started playing, Nick, in 1964 in Melbourne, and then I moved up here at the beginning of 1965 and started playing competition immediately, both comps in 1965 for Warona. I was staying.
As I understand it, it didn't take you very long to reach the Division 1 standard either, did it?
No, we were very young. We had a very young team at Warona because we were all steelworks cadets, and particularly in the second year I was there, 1965, a couple of new cadets started, Dave Hiscox and Warren Thorpe particularly, and we had a good team, and we won A reserve. They changed the names to A grade, A reserve, B and C for 1966, and we won A reserve in the first comp of 1966, and then we did a deal with the association who wanted to get young people into A grade. They gave us, in return for a player, Billy Sylvester, who was a good player, we swapped with Keira Street. Billy Sylvester went to Keira Street and we got David Ainsworth as the number one to take us into A grade. Now, David Ainsworth had been in the mid-60s New South Wales junior champion, so he's a pretty good get. In fact, he was probably the best, well, the second best number one playing in the district at the time. And with him at number one, we actually won A grade in that same year. So we won A reserve and A grade in the same year for Verona and played A grade, which became Division 1 right through until 2001. In 1966, David Ainsworth left the club then. I think I played number one. I might have played number one for Verona there for a while. Then I joined, the team broke up and I joined Port Lees Club and played number one for Port Lees Club in 1968.
All right, and you held that position for quite some time, I understand.
Off and on, yeah. With the influx of players through the years, I was either number one or number two for a lot of years, and the last time I played number one Division 1 was probably 1992 for Rowsell. Yeah.
You would obviously have a number of memorable moments in that time on the squash courts. Can you tell us a few of those?
Well, we've already mentioned one, winning A reserve and A grade in the same year, and playing in the same team as David Ainsworth was a real honour. I've got a story similar to Mari's about later on when I was playing number one, I came up against David in a semi-final at the Lysards courts, and he beat me 27-0 as well. So, but then playing Division 1 for so long has obviously been a highlight for me and the people that I've played against. People in the 60s like John Simpson, who was really dominated the 60s in men's squash. He was the district champion for 18 years in a row. Bruce Dunkley, Max Chard, people like David Ainsworth, who I already mentioned, and Bobby Hanson. They were all strong players in the 60s, and to have the privilege of playing against them was something special. I was very young at the time. And winning the junior championship in 1966. Then sort of moving through to the 70s, we had a new sort of era. Toby Bartle was the district champion for a lot of years in the 70s, and then Ian Yates coming through from Bowral as a junior to challenge Toby. Particular rivals in that time with Toby and with Peter Shadat coming through, and Joe Castro a bit later on, Paul Murray, John Walker and Kyle Page over the years. The highlight that stands out for me was being president of the association in 1983, which was the 25th year, or the 50th comp, the first comp of 1983. I was president of the association. I also captained the Dapto squash team, which won men's Division 1 in that year, so that's pretty much a highlight. Winning the district championship, senior championship in the late 80s was also a highlight. Playing in Sydney for Engadine with Bob Martin, and for 4 or 5 years also was a highlight. There's been many highlights over time, and of course a big highlight was playing former world champion Hashim Khan, a bit later on, Albert mentioned he was here in 1959. This was sort of like in the early 80s when he was in his 60s. But he played at Dapto courts and at Helensburgh courts in exhibition games. Both went to 5 and Hashim won both of them.
On this particular court here?
On this particular court here, yeah, this one.
Okay.
Had many memorable battles on this court because I used to play for this club when it was the Dapto Squash Club. Yeah.
You were the junior district champion and the district champion.
That's right.
Have you got a Masters title? That'd be the only one missing, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. After I turned 40, they very rarely had a veterans title, and I did have one chance of winning the veterans title that I can remember, and I played Phil Grant in the final, and he beat me. Yes.
Okay.
Phil and I have had a good rivalry over the years as well.
You have played Division 1 number 1 for a lot of years. You've played many players. Are there any that stand out to you that you would like to acknowledge over that time?
Players like Toby Bartle and Peter Shadat and Joe Castro. Joe I played in successive Leisure Coast finals and he was too good for me, but we had a bit of a rivalry for a couple of years and very good games. Paul Murray, John Walker, Kyle Page, a whole lot of players who've I've had rivalries at particular times over the years, and you really look forward to playing them and doing as well as you could, with mixed results of course, because you win some and lose some, but it was the rivalry and the friendship that went with it which was important. Yeah.
Always made it enjoyable.
Yes.
What is it that has kept you in the game of squash for so long?
There's probably 2 reasons. Firstly, the game itself. I really love the game. I've often thought, what would I do if I didn't play squash? And because of the physical challenge and the mental challenge all at the same time in a relatively short period of time. In less than an hour, you've been physically challenged and mentally challenged to quite to the extreme, really, and it's great value from that perspective. And I've gone to great lengths to keep playing. The other thing is very definitely the people, the social side. All of those names that I've mentioned, that Mari's mentioned, all those people, thousands of people that I've met through squash. Really, there's just great people. But squash players are great people, and I enjoy playing against them, I enjoy meeting them, and I enjoy socialising with them.
Neil, as well as being a player and you're involved in a committee for some time, you had a great deal to do with the computer results or the getting all that together or something each week. Is that true?
The story of the computer processing of results and computer rankings of players goes back to the early 1970s when Keith Wise, who really ran the Men's Association in the late 60s and early 70s, he did a wonderful job. He was registrar, treasurer and secretary of the association. He got together with Dave Bryars, who's with us tonight, in order to come up with the first computer rankings of players based on results, and that lasted for a few years, and then a man called Andrew Smith replaced that with a program that he wrote when he was, I think, registrar of the association. That went on for a few years, and then at the time that we ended up with the IDSRA and the Leisure Coast, I actually wrote a program for the Leisure Coast, which was processing the Leisure Coast results in parallel with the IDSRA results, and at a later stage Andrew ceased to process the results and the IDSRA came on board with what we were doing. So we were processing the IDSRA and the Leisure Coast results up until the join, obviously, when it was all IDSRA, and then that was replaced only in the last 3 or 4 years with the Squash Matrix, which is the web-based application now, which allows everybody to look up their results online, and it's marvellous. If the results get entered, you can see how you're going, how the team's going, and how your opponents are going. It's really good.
Is there anything else you'd like to add at this point?
No, other than I expect in the evening the dinner dance to catch up with a whole lot of people, and I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. I'd just like to add personally that it was Neil many years ago, perhaps 15, 20 years ago, that he took 2 players, myself and Dave Johnson, from Division 4 to Division 1, and you believed in us and mentored us and made us Division 1 players. So I thank you for that as well.
Thanks, Rick. And that was a pleasure. You have never been out of Division 1 since, have you?
No, I don't win so often now, but I'm still there in the book.
Yeah.